And on the third night, I have this outrageous dream. And as far as I can see, women are coming from everywhere, young and old. And I'm looking at a women's revival. I can still feel it every time I talk about it. And they're all coming to hear the book of Esther be taught. And in the dream, I'm the only man there. I'm given an ancient Bible, which I begin to understand that I was being given a Mordecai assignment to mobilize what I'm watching in the dream. And a woman stands up and she says, and these two words in the book of Esther actually mean Nazgul, Nezgul. I explode out of the dream, instantly knowing it. You gotta love God and his brilliance. He knows I watched that movie where the Nazgul witch king is destroying the armies of men. And the king's daughter takes off her helmet and says, I am no man. And she pierces the Nazgul witch king. I wake up and I know there's coming a women's movement that will have authority over witchcraft. They'll have authority over spiritual realms of Haman's ideologies, transgenderism. Something's coming with mothers and women who are going to war for their children. And their fastings and their public stand, I believe, is going to shift the history of America.
Well, welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we teach you how to live fully alive, co-labor with Jesus, and change the world. And I have my really good friend, Lou Engle, with me, who he is amazing. He was the leader and founder of The Call, and we've done things together. We've worked together. Our students have been soldiers in his army many, many times.
Yes.
And we've been privileged to be friends for many, many years. And Lou, thank you so much for being on here. So appreciate it.
It's a privilege. You've always provoked me. I hear your stories and I get so jealous, and then I realize I got a few myself.
You got your stories too, and now you're living in Colorado Springs. 7 children. They were all over my house, and you know, I got to tell this story on you, Lou. We've had, you probably don't know this, you wouldn't remember the numbers, but we've actually had lunch together 5 times. In those 5 times, you have been fasting 4 of those 5 times. And I'm always sitting there feasting while you're fasting and walking away. And I'm like, okay, do I feel guilty or not, you know?
Well, see, I'm sure the Lord is going to say to me when I get into heaven, what were you thinking? But then I remember he says he remembers all our sacrifices. But the worst lunch was with Bill and Benny and you, and I was fasting. Benny made steaks.
I know.
And I was fasting, and then I start confessing my sins. I was so frustrated with myself. The next day, I just blew the fast.
Well, your kids came over my house. This had to be, oh gosh, your kids were pretty young. So it had to be 12, 15 years ago. And
yeah.
And you were, it was the one time that we ate together where you weren't fasting. And your kids all came over. Kathy made a big old meal. You guys ate everything that was on the table that was edible. And then I think I've told you this story, but it's a funny story. So we have a bar. There used to be a bar when we bought it, our house. It was a bar, and we changed it into a confectionery. So Kathy took all the shelves that are behind the bar where you'd normally have, like, you know, alcohol, and she filled it with candy, different kind of candy to make it look like a confectionery. Well, that candy was a decoration. Like, it literally, by the time you got to our house, it was like 12, 13 years old. And when you guys left, there wasn't a single piece of candy left in any of those jars.
I don't remember that.
Gosh, I was like, I don't know. Literally, like there was Tootsie Rolls. As one of them, the Tootsie Rolls were so hard. And Kathy's like, she turns to me, and we both start cracking up because all you see is empty glass. And she goes, "Oh, I see how Lou fasts now." Oh,
I got 5 boys. They'll just eat it up.
oh man, we had the biggest laugh. We're like, I see how he fasts. He's like a freaking bear. He hibernates, eats all his food and hibernates. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry I had to tell that story on you.
That's a great story.
Yeah, we laugh about it. I bet you we tell that story twice a year because we love your family. Yeah. You were also the leader. Well, the call, I'd say Bound for Life was you're the founder of the Bound for Life pro-life movement. And the call actually for so many years was dedicated to the pro-life movement and to the defeating of Roe versus Wade was a big part of that. Not the only part of the movement, but a big part of that movement.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you labored. I mean, we labored together, but you especially were the spear point of that. And that was a 25-year journey or something. You would have the numbers better than I. And then I think, were you shocked when it got overturned finally?
Well, when we saw the leak from Justice Alito, when we saw the leak, we knew something's coming down. I was on an airplane flying to Dallas. Right before I take off, I get a phone call from a Hispanic gal, that heard me speaking at the Call Nashville, where we put the life tape on their mouths with 70,000 people.
Yes. Yes.
Brian and Jen led worship.
Yep.
And it was anyway, we're doing this call for life, and I said there's a woman there or something like this that had an abortion, and God is saying you're gonna be used mightily by God to be a vessel for the ending of abortion through your pain. And that Hispanic gal got the call. God touched her. She ended up going up and down California with something called California Estado Provida, California pro-life state, mobilizing Hispanics. And she gives me a call from Dallas on the plane. Roe v. Wade's over. And I just started weeping.
Wow.
We were like those who dreamed. Most people didn't believe it could be turned, but we had dreams and stories that were compelling. And it was 18 years, and you honored me. I heard your message that you said one of the greatest testimonies of persevering prayer is that 18 years standing in front of the Supreme Court, taking communion and pleading a blood that speaks better than the blood of Abel. And I'm very grateful for that. That really touched me, Kris. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that from a natural perspective, 3 years earlier, no one would have believed that would have ever be overturned, right? I mean,
right.
It really was. It wasn't predictable. It was a miracle.
Well, it was a miracle, Kris, and but we've trained our people, our guys, to listen to their dreams. So every prayer meeting, almost, we start with, "Did you have a dream last night?" It's divine intelligence. We dreamed 3 of those judges. We got a dream. The man from New Jersey would be the next judge. His name was Alito. We saw Alito. He's from New Jersey. We begin to pray in Alito. Matt Lockett had a dream. And in that dream, Vice President Pence's wife is all disturbed about the Supreme Court. And Matt is her bodyguard in the dream and says, "Don't worry, remember the name Amy Coney Barrett." So we begin to pray Amy Coney Barrett into being. We dreamed John Roberts by name when we first went to D.C. before anybody knew anything.
Wow.
We dreamed it. And we just prayed those dreams, and it's necessary for divine intelligence, spiritual warfare. So that's part of our story, Kris. It's pretty remarkable.
You know, I honestly, I heard that story a long time ago, but I did not remember it. That's profound. Dream, you have been, well, from the time I've known you, you've been a dreamer. Like the Lord has actually used dreams to guide not just this movement that you're a part of, but pretty much your whole life, right?
Yeah, it started way back. I started receiving dreams, but it wasn't never. I wasn't the great dreamer, Kris.
Really?
I made a covenant with a man named Kris Berglund 40 years ago. This year, 84, and from that moment on, he began to dream for me.
Wow.
And I had a dream, and in the dream, a woman walks into our circle of leaders and said, "Did anybody have a dream last night?" I said, "No, did you?" And she says, "Yes, I had a dream that Kris Berglund is leading a movement that will touch the whole world, and he'll build it on 3 words: Celeste, sirens, and Starbucks."
Say that again. Wait. Say that again.
Kris Berglund is going to lead a movement that touches the whole world, and he'll build it on 3 words: Celeste, sirens, and Starbucks.
What does that mean?
It's brilliant. And I wake up and I'm thinking, why is Kris Berglund leading? I'm the leader.
Exactly.
But the Lord showed me the reason he's leading, because he's the celestial man. He gets revelation, and I'm the siren. Most of what I've done have been his dreams. I proclaim those dreams and movements occur. I'm a siren. I know my calling is to create movements. But Starbucks always confused us until we really got to understand him, that Starbucks is the apostolic application of the prophetic. Put it on the ground and mobilize the dream, and you change culture, you change history.
Wow.
So it was a brilliant dream, and it helped me to really honor that prophet that nobody knows, but he's the celestial man.
Wow. Are you guys still connected, Lou?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. They're all our lives. We will be connected, just like you and Bill.
Yeah.
All our lives. I'm in covenant with that man. And with covenant, God, covenant friends share their secrets.
Wow.
It's just how it works.
Okay, now we're going to fast forward. Well, I don't want to say fast forward, because that was one of the moods that I got caught up in it. And the only time I fasted for 7 days, which I want to tell you, I give myself credit, I didn't eat for 7 days, was when I watched you in Roseville preach, and the message was called Fast Forward. So I don't want to talk about fasting forward, but I do want to talk about what's next. And
Yes.
and you've got this message, 1 million women, D.C., Esther story, communion revival. Tell me about that.
Well, Kris, it goes back to 1999 when I prayed that prayer, how can I turn America back to God? And that woman came to me and says, I'm going to pay your salary this year.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. She said, I'll pay your salary. She paid my salary for 15 years.
Wow.
Funded stadiums. I just met with her again. She's 100 years old.
Oh, my.
And as a son, I came to her and I said, I don't even know if she knew me. Just to say, I come to you to say thank you for changing so many lives. Our life. It was just one of those precious, holy moments, similar to my moment with Benny Johnson. And so that set me on a course from a book called Shaping History Through Prayer and Fasting by Derek Prince.
Yep.
And part of the premise of his book is that nations in crisis will be shaped and changed through united, massive, solemn assemblies. So I've lived under that book for 40 years. And so this is what I've done is solemn assemblies. So I thought I was done after Azusa Now. When Bethel, with us, we joined together in that stadium, maybe 70,000, a glorious day. I don't know if you know, Kris, there were 2 guys there that came to that thing. And I was saying, some of you need to call your fathers and get reconciled right now. And this one guy says to this other guy, a phone number just went through my mind. I think you're supposed to call it. So the guy calls the phone number, gets his dad he hasn't seen in 20 years. And
oh, my goodness.
Reconciled on the phone.
Oh, my goodness.
That was one of the greatest miracles that day. A guy without an eyeball came. Says, I'm going to get my eyeball. I know the guys that prayed for him. His eye formed right in front of them. He can see. As I said, now it's special, particularly to be joined with you guys. But so I thought it was done. And then 2017, that's when I had this dream when witches rose up to curse President Trump worldwide. And then I've asked the question, why would witches rise up worldwide to curse him? He's not a moral man. But I think the spirit realm understood this man was a threat to their blood altar.
Yep.
I got stories about this. But so anyway, so I went up to Estes Park, and my wife looked it up and said, some people call it Esther's Park. And I'm up in Estes Park, Colorado, and I'm fasting. I was supposed to fast 5 days, but I saw an egg in eye, and that was over with. And on the third night, I have this outrageous dream. And as far as I can see, women are coming from everywhere, young and old. And I'm looking at a women's revival. I can still feel it every time I talk about it. And they're all coming to hear the book of Esther be taught. And in the dream, I'm the only man there. I've given an ancient Bible, which I begin to understand that I was being given a Mordecai assignment to mobilize what I'm watching in the dream. And a woman stands up and she says, and these two words in the book of Esther actually mean Nazgul, Nezgul. I explode out of the dream, instantly knowing it. You got to love God and his brilliance. He knows I watched that movie where the Nazgul witch king is destroying the armies of men. And the king's daughter takes off her helmet and says, I am no man. And she pierces the Nazgul witch king. I wake up and I know there's coming a women's movement that will have authority over witchcraft. They'll have authority over spiritual realms of Haman's ideologies, transgenderism. Something's coming with mothers and women who are going to war for their children. And their fastings and their public stand, I believe, is going to shift the history of America. That's what we're believing.
Wow. That's amazing. So you're gathering, practically speaking, the goal is to gather a million women in D.C. Is that correct?
Well, we're calling 1 million women.
Yeah.
I have no idea. We don't really have registrations. We ask people to register. It doesn't matter to me, but I know there will be millions online. Other nations are going into it. And the thing to me that rocked me most of all is when I was thinking, when am I going to hold this gathering? I felt, Lord, it's got to be on the Day of Atonement, where the blood is, the high priest goes beyond the veil, offers the blood on behalf of a nation, not really for families, but for the nation. And on the Day of Atonement, a nation either goes into judgment or mercy. And I said, God, it's got to be on the Day of Atonement. Lord, let it be on a Saturday. I looked it up. It's on a Saturday, October 12th.
Wow.
Day of Atonement. And this is where it comes in my whole story with you guys and Benny Johnson and her book, The Power of Communion. And you know the story before she passed away. I asked her to lay her hands upon me that if she passes away, and I love Bill. Bill said, well, we're not believing for that.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, well, I'm not either. I mean, I'm not believing. But if you pass away, would you lay your hands upon me and pray that I could carry your legacy? And when and she did it, it's one of the holiest moments of my life. And I felt like, what if 1 million women, or even millions worldwide, would take communion on that day and offer up the blood and apply the blood to the doorposts of our families, the national guilt of our nation. I've pondered that at Passover, the blood didn't just save families, the blood didn't just save their children, the blood judged the gods of Egypt. I don't think we know the power of the blood when applied, even in the heavenly realms. And we've been kind of exploring in faith this dimension. I believe it'll be one of the greatest communion days in history.
Wow.
And I'll be looking at Benny Johnson and say, Benny, I'm carrying this forward. I told you I would. Anyway, pretty precious.
And the overall arching goal, I think you've already probably shared it in different ways, but the overarching goal at the D.C. gathering for women is what?
Well, there's three or four storylines here, Kris. The first storyline was the 214 encounter, or 2 hours of a prophetic explosion and an interruption in a meeting. And the word was this, that 1 million women, like Promise Keepers, would go to the mall in D.C. and they would come in the spirit of Jeremiah 9, death has climbed through our windows. Call the wailing women, teach your daughters to wail, for death has climbed through our windows. The children are being cut off from the streets. And when they go to the mall, it'll begin a salvation for America. And so, Kris, I'm carrying this. We're believing that God is going to hear the cries of mothers who have lost their kids. They come to me all the time. They come to you with moral revolution. I'm sure my kid was a radical evangelist, now gone into that lifestyle. It happens all the time. And that groan is being heard by God.
Yep.
And we did a 40-day season of fasting, kind of mostly 21's radical and less. But at the end of that fast, Kris, I said to the Lord, you gave us revelation in dreams, how to stand in front of the Supreme Court with life tape and pleading the blood. If I'm your friend, would you give me a dream and show me how I can win 100,000 LGBTQ? He gives me a dream. And I think you probably heard this, but in this dream, it was 2 words, an explosion, Delta factor. I explode out of the dream and I said, I know that's you, Lord, but I don't know what Delta factor means. So if I'm your friend, give me a dream and tell me what Delta factor means. I have a dream. I fall back to sleep, have a dream. I'm with a high-level military officer. And I said, excuse me, sir, what's the Delta factor? He says, it's the leader of 1 million. And I woke up and I knew the Lord had said, 1 million women are the Delta factor. So Delta means change. In Bethel, there's a movement called Change, which you're very much engaged with. And it's the testimonies of those coming out of the lifestyle. Bob Jones gave me a prophetic word 20 years ago. Your assignment is to pray the vision I had in 1989 of 100,000 LGBT who would be saved and transformed, and they would be the first wave of another great awakening. So with that dream, I just knew this. There's something in this. So I'm reading Francis Frangipane's book on This Day We Fight from the Lord of the Rings. And he said, I looked for a prayer movement before every revival, and I found one, except for the 70s Jesus movement. So he said, Lord, why wasn't there a prayer movement before the Jesus movement? And he said, I had my prayer movement. He writes it in the book. The mothers of America were losing their kids to the countercultural revolution of the 60s. And he says, and I raised 1 million women up to cry out to me. And I answered them with the revival of the 70s.
Wow.
Kris, I'm believing for that.
Wow, that's amazing. You know, I think I told you this, but it kind of goes along a little bit with the spirit of what we're talking about. And I think it was in December of 2020, if I remember correctly. But I shared it publicly. But I had a dream, and in the dream I heard these words: the iniquity of the Amorite is complete. The iniquity of the Amorite was complete, and I had remembered that phrase. I didn't know where it was, but I had remembered that phrase is in the Bible. And so I looked. I actually Googled it because I couldn't find it. And it was in reference to Abraham. Abraham was, God said, hey, you're going to have a wonderful life. You're going to be the father of many nations. Sarah's going to be the mother of many nations. And then he talked about the fact that there would just be 400 years there's going to be this little glitch of 400 years in which your people will be in bondage. And at the end of that time, He said, and he told Abraham, until the iniquity of the Amorite is complete. And then, of course, that's when Moses comes forth and releases the people. and so I woke up out of the dream, and my heart was pounding, and I'm like, the iniquity of the Amorite, what the heck is that? And then immediately I looked up the passage later. The Lord said that He said to me when I woke up, He said, it would be better for you to not be born than to cause one of my little ones to stumble. And then He said to me, the mutilation of children has created the completion of the iniquity of the Amorite. And then He said to me, I am taking a hold of history. And I actually preached on it for months on different messages around the difference between free will and sovereignty. You know, the Lord put two trees in the garden. We know all this theologically. Yeah. And, you know, there are things that, you know, for example, we all know that the Lord wants everyone to be saved, but we know not everyone will be saved.
Right.
And so we know that God created free will, and God loves free will, right? He doesn't just create free will, He loves free will. But every once in a while, God steps into history, and He actually I don't want to say takes away, He overrides free will. For example, He hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
Like He said to Pharaoh, you no longer have a choice. I will sovereignly make your choice for you. And there's a few times that we see in biblical history where the Lord takes a hold of history and the will of man does not matter in those times.
Right.
And
what do you feel like for America?
What's that?
What do you feel like for America with it? Keep going.
I feel like the Lord said to me, I have taken a hold of history, and the will of man will not determine the outcome of history. And then that's when I prophesied the Trump, the winning of the Trump campaign, the first one, and then the second one. But I believe that although, you know, in the midst of this, the sovereignty, obviously there's we obviously still have free will, but in the instance of history, I feel like the Lord is moving history forward, and he is the anger of the Lord burns towards those who would transgender children, those who would mutilate children, those who would abuse children, and I think abortion was, obviously I had a dream many years before that of rain. The Lord was weeping, and the drops from His eyes turned to blood, and the blood was covering the earth. And He said, and I saw some horrible things in the dream, as far as scenes. And the Lord was weeping over the murdering of children. But this was like 15 years later. The Lord's like, the iniquity of the Amorite is complete, and I feel like the anger and the justice of the Lord can I say it this way, better ways. The Father has decided to protect the children. And where I think that He has a hold of history. And I had this many years ago, 35 years ago, I had this vision, and in the vision, God was walking down this path, and there was people resisting Him, kind of like football players, like they'd stand in the way of His path, and He was just grabbing them and throwing them like they were rag dolls. And then that happened like 5 times in the dream, and then the next scene in the dream, I was standing in the way, and when He got close to me, He said, "Get out of my way! Get out of my way!" And I put my arms up like the rest of the men did to resist Him, and He reached for me. And when He did, I moved out of the way, and He passed. And without looking back, He said, "Now just follow me."
Wow.
And so the Lord's taking the crooked places, right? And He's making them straight.
Yeah.
Like there's a John the Baptist, or you want to call it Elijah movement, that is preparing the way. And the justice of the Lord is on our country, and it's on the countries. And I don't think you're going to stop this move of God. Like we're in the middle of a tipping point. I'm so excited for the dream you had and the movement, because I feel like we're in this tipping point in history. And you can actually already see it, right? You see like people coming out, like people who aren't even believers. People are standing against this movement, which has actually started more than 40 years ago. And now you see people coming out going, what are you doing to my children? Right. And there's this outcry, right? There's like this Esther outcry, like what is happening to our children? And so I'm super excited with what you're doing.
Well, this is part of the reason. I think you know Jenny Donnelly, how God supernaturally called her, said, you're going to raise up 1 million women to pray in D.C. It's totally apart from me. God joins us together. Now we're doing this thing at the day called Don't Mess with Our Kids. And I've actually been saying, Kris, I don't know what you think about it. There's a new civil rights movement coming, and it's called parental rights. There is going to be an uprising of women who say, you don't mess with our kids, we'll go to jail. It happened in Peru, and they overthrew the government. They just passed a bill in Peru with the new government that life begins in conception. It's a complete turnaround when believers prayed and took a public stand. And I'm believing the days are coming that thousands, if not millions, will stand in the streets, walk in the streets and say, there's 2 hills we'll die on. Here's the 2 hills. In the image of God, he created man, male and female. And the second is, you shall not shed innocent blood. You cannot compromise on those mountains. And I think the women are rising up to take their stand like Esther, and the Mordecais and men are joining with it all together. That's why we're saying every woman in Esther, every man a Mordecai, everybody comes. But the real focus is on women taking their stand together on that day.
I love it. So the date is October 12th, 2024.
Yes.
Correct?
Right.
On
the mall in D.C.
On the mall in D.C. We'll put that in the chat there. And then for those that are listening, you can go to amillionwomen.org, amillionwomen.org. We'll also put that in the chat. And you can find out more, what it's all about, how to get there, where they're meeting, what times. And we're really believing God for a tipping point in history. We're really believing, and I believe it isn't going to be. I believe there's an acceleration. I don't think it's going to be the 40 years, 50 years of abortion. I think we're going to see. I think we're in a quick move of God. I think we're going to see the ending of transgenderism as we know it, at least.
Yes.
And by the way, Lou, I saw a vision. This is 7 or 8 years ago. I told you about this vision, but I saw, how you watch a movie and it pops up and it says, hey, if you use this insecticide and you have cancer, call this number. And it was like, there's like civil lawsuits against these, chemical companies that were, that were making these different insecticides, and people were catching cancer. I saw those ads just like that, but it said, if your body was transgendered and during this time and this time, and your psychiatrist told you this and your doctor told you this, call this number. And I saw multi-million-dollar civil suits against psychiatrists, psychologists, the school system, against doctors, against nurses. And I believe that what happened in now I'm talking about the practical side here. What happened with cigarettes, where there was, we're going to see that. And I bet you it happens within the next 7 years. There's going to be so many lawsuits against doctors and insurance companies, school systems, that it will be so expensive to do a transgender surgery on anyone that you'll see, I feel like this is going to be part of the practical part of the tipping point.
I feel this I feel Solemn Assembly is a tipping point moment. You have to sustain what you gain on that day.
Yeah.
We haven't always done that well.
Yeah.
But Jenny Donnelly is seeking to raise up 250,000 prayer hubs, women's hubs, to just sustain what we gain. It's interesting, when we mobilized for this Esther, we weren't even thinking about Israel. Then October 7th comes. And then this massive worldwide spirit of Hamas, we dreamed that the spirit of Hamas was the spirit of Haman, and that there was a holy war in the spirit with that spirit. And we're on that day, we're going to take a stand and say, God, can you shift? I mean, I read the Bible, things shift at certain fulcrum points, hinges of history. And I think what you're saying is a tipping point. Could we believe that the war can actually be in a measure restrained? I'm believing for that. Hey, why not?
Exactly. And may the matriarchal, but I'm thinking of may the spirit of motherhood return, and may the spirit of fatherhood return.
Yes.
And maybe we have a restoration of family. May that return. And may that immoral, demonic spirit that wants to destroy our families and destroy our children be driven out of off the earth, out of our countries. Lou, I love you so much. Every time we get together, you inspire me, and I spend the next 2 nights thinking about, wow, we got to change the world. I love you so much.
I love you so much, Kris.
Thanks for the interview. If you're watching this, please join us in the Million Woman. It's not a march.
Women. It's not a march, but everyone calls it a march. We think maybe we should march.
Exactly. On the mall there, and all the information will be right there. You can click right on it, and we're going to see the tipping point of history. We're going to be a part of it. We're not just going to see it. We have the privilege of being a part of the hinge of history, is what you just said. The hinge of history. I love it.
That's my favorite.
God bless you. Join us there. I'll see you there. Lou, thank you. And,
love you.
and God bless.
Thanks, man. Love you. Thanks so much.